Have you ever wondered what secrets lie sealed beneath the stone floors of ancient cathedrals? What becomes of royalty when time, not enemies, becomes the final conqueror? This is the chilling, fascinating and unforgettable story of Queen Elizabeth I, not in life, but in death. Elizabeth Tudor, known to the world as Queen Elizabeth I, wasn't just a ruler. She was the living embodiment of an age. Her name alone inspired loyalty, fear, admiration, and sometimes hatred. She was Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the last Tudor monarch. For 44 years, she reigned over England through rebellion, war, religious conflict, and the greatest threats Europe could hurl her way. She defied the mighty Philip II of Spain, crushed the terrifying power of the Spanish Armada, and steered England from the chaos of civil strife into a golden age of exploration, art, and empire. But even Gloriana, with all her power and wisdom, could not escape her greatest fear, the fate of her body after death. Behind the painted face and elaborate gowns was a woman deeply haunted by mortality. Elizabeth had spent her entire reign surrounded by death, assassins, betrayal, family conspiracies, and the constant threat of foreign invasion. She saw how quickly queens could fall, how even the closest kin could become deadly rivals. Her own cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, had once sought her throne and paid for it with her life. Elizabeth had signed that death warrant herself. Though she remained stoic in public, that choice haunted her to her final days. But nothing frightened her more than the gruesome process that awaited her body after her final breath. In the 16th century, embalming was not a delicate or respectful tradition. It was harsh, invasive, and violent. The human body was treated like a machine to be taken apart. After death, the body was laid on a stone slab, cold, clinical, and heartless. The flesh was sliced open with long, sharp blades. The organs, the heart, liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines were removed by hand. Then, to delay the inevitable rot, the hollow cavity was stuffed with strongly scented herbs and spices, cloves, cinnamon, myrrh, and other costly ingredients. These were not added for respect or ritual. They were there to fight the horrific stench of decay that would soon follow. Elizabeth, in her final hours, begged that her body be spared this fate. She asked her physicians and court not to open her, not to cut away what she believed should be presented to God whole. She wanted to meet her Maker as she had lived, unchanged, untouched, unbroken. But death does not negotiate. On the 24th of March, 1603, Queen Elizabeth I died. And with her death, all the commands and protections of her royal office vanished. The physicians and surgeons, bound by duty and practicality, carried out what had to be done. Her body was taken to the embalming room. There, her chest was opened. Her internal organs, the heart that had carried the hopes of a kingdom, were removed. Her stomach, liver, and intestines were taken out, and in their place, fragrant spices were packed tightly. These desperate efforts were not to honor her, but to prevent a catastrophe, the swelling and bursting of her corpse during her state funeral. Without this intervention, the pressure of gases inside her decomposing body could have turned her coffin into a time bomb. The risk was real. Other royal funerals in history had witnessed such gruesome events, coffins bursting open, the horror of exposed remains staining what was meant to be a final act of dignity. The embalmers dared not let Elizabeth's farewell become such a nightmare. Once the embalming was complete, Elizabeth's body was wrapped in rich crimson velvet, embroidered with Tudor roses, symbols of a dynasty now at its end. She was sealed inside a heavy lead-lined coffin, designed not just for majesty, but for containment. The coffin was closed, the ceremonies began, and the final journey of England's last Tudor monarch began. The royal barge carried her down the Thames, through grey waters and under darkened skies. Thousands stood silently along the riverbanks, mourning their queen. The scene was solemn, beautiful, and deceptive. Those closest to the barge whispered of a strange, clinging scent. A sickly sweet odor drifting from the coffin, barely contained by the lead casing. Even in death, Elizabeth's body reminded the world of its frailty. The gases of decay were seeping through cracks no eye could see, carried on the breeze alongside her fading legacy. Had the coffin failed, had the lead shell split apart under pressure, England would have witnessed a moment of dreadful horror, the sudden explosion of its most revered queen, her remains scattered before her people. But the coffin held just enough. Elizabeth was interred at Westminster Abbey, beneath the towering stones of that sacred place. Her tomb, magnificent and peaceful on the outside, promised eternal rest. But centuries later, the silence of her resting place would be shattered. In the late 1800s, during the reign of Queen Victoria, a man named Dean Arthur Stanley was granted permission to explore the sealed royal tombs beneath the abbey. Curiosity had gripped the Victorian imagination. History was being unearthed, literally, and Stanley, lantern in hand, ventured into the cold, dark underworld of England's royal dead. The air was thick with the scent of centuries. The walls were heavy with silence. As he stepped into the chamber where Elizabeth lay, he was not greeted by the glory of a queen, but by the crumbling wreckage of time. The once beautiful coffin had collapsed. The wooden layers had turned to powder. The rich velvet was discolored and brittle. Even the lead, meant to last forever, had warped and bent beneath the slow pressure of internal decay. The initials E.R., Elizabeth Regina, still faintly marked the lid, a ghostly whisper of the woman who had once been Gloriana. But that was not all. Above Elizabeth's broken coffin lay the remains of her half-sister, Mary I. In life, their rivalry had torn England apart in fire and blood. In death, they were locked together in the same narrow vault. Enemies in life, neighbors in eternity. The air around them was dense with centuries of trapped rot. Stanley stood alone, surrounded by two queens, both long gone, yet still bound by a story that refused to die. What he saw confirmed a grim truth. Even the greatest of monarchs are not spared the slow, patient hunger of time. Elizabeth's body, embalmed with such urgency, had not decayed in peace. The internal gases had continued their terrible work. The coffin bulged unnaturally, the velvet was stained, the wood had vanished. And yet, in those ruins, fragments of her identity endured. The Tudor rose, the faded embroidery, the weight of legend lingering in dust and silence. Above ground, the world had moved on. Tourists strolled the polished marble of Westminster Abbey, unaware of the scene beneath their feet. They admired the beauty, the music, the elegance of it all. But under the stones lay a different story, not one of glory, but of decay. A coffin, rotting, bloated, fragile, still housing the remains of a queen who had once ruled oceans. Elizabeth's tomb is more than a monument. It is a message carved not in stone, but in time. A reminder that even the greatest rulers must surrender to the earth, that velvet fades, that lead bends, that flesh, no matter how royal, succumbs to nature's final claim. Her legacy endures in books, in paintings, in the story of an era she defined. But her body, once adorned in gold, now rests in a vault of silence, its grandeur consumed by centuries of darkness. Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen who commanded armies and outwitted kings, lies now in broken pieces. Time is the final ruler, and none, not even a queen, can outlive its reign.